The first time I read these stories, I felt something in my chest tighten in a way I hadn't before. Not a cheap jump scare or a movie adrenaline rush, but the small, persistent kind of chill that keeps returning to the same image. A pair of eyes at a window, a face in the dark, a sound that shouldn't be there. I kept thinking, I'll tell myself I'm being dramatic. Then I'd remember the detail that wouldn't let go, and the memory would prick at me all over again. These are the genuinely creeped me out the first time I experienced them. They're the ones I still picture when I'm alone in the dark. The first one was the night I was delivering pizzas. It was late, later than I'd normally take a run, but the phone had been busy and the place that ordered promised a fat tip. The road out there was one of those narrow lanes that disappear into trees. No streetlights, just my headlights cutting through fog, and a smell of burned leaves hanging low to the ground. The GPS said I'd arrived before I could see anything but a clearing and an unlit building sitting an awkward distance from the road, like it didn't belong there at all. My truck was warm. The pizza boxes were hot in the carrier. I remember the crunch of my shoes in the gravel because I kept noticing small things, how quiet it was, how my breath puffed in the air. The house had no porch light. I could see a single window facing the road, and for a moment I thought someone had left it open. The air felt too still. The notion that someone might suddenly appear at the door flicked through my head, the same weird little spike of worry that comes when a loose porch bell rings at midnight. I knocked. No answer. I called the number on the ticket. No answer. I knocked again, a little harder. The window to my right, the main one, was dark for a second. Then a face filled it. Not just any face. A woman sat right at the glass, pressed in as if she could get through it. Her eyes were so wide they looked almost too big for her face, like she'd surprised herself by opening them. She just stared. She didn't move her mouth. The outline of a smile, but not right. Wrong. Not a friendly smile. More like a stretching, patient thing. My heart did that thing where it dropped and then tried to run. I set the pizzas down to leave them by the door and suddenly heard a scraping sound from the rear of my truck. I turned to see my van's rearview mirror reflecting a pair of legs moving slowly in the hedge, as if someone had been following my headlights from the tree line. I didn't think, I reacted. I grabbed the pizzas and started toward the truck faster than necessary. The door wouldn't open, the key wouldn't turn. I fumbled with the handle, and that's when the woman's face moved in the window. Her head tilted, and her eyes blinked once, slowly, as if she had all the time in the world.
When I finally got the truck to cough to life, I felt it under my feet, a wet slapping sound, like a dozen small knives. I stopped, slid out again, and saw every tire shredded down to the cords. All four. They'd been cut. There was a glint of metal under the windshield wiper. The hair at the back of my neck rose. I ran. I abandoned everything except the body of the truck and myself. I ran into the trees and sat down on cold earth with my back against a trunk, breathing so hard I thought I might be sick. In the distance, lights came like a slow, blessed mercy, headlights, and then flashing red and blues. The officers were calm, professional, efficient. They found what looked like long, homemade razors and some El Cheapo pry bars in the hedge. No prints. No one hiding. No footprints that matched anything but my own panic. They asked me questions, wrote things down. I told them about the woman at the window. They took my statement, and one of them said, "We'll do a perimeter sweep." They did. They called for tow. And when I drove home in a cop car, the thing that kept replaying in my head wasn't the tires or the tool or the hole in my confidence. It was her smile. That slow, wrong smile. The way her eyes didn't look like they belonged to a human being that would be looking at me at 1 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. I quit that job a week later. People say it's just a prank, some kids with a knife and a grudge. Maybe. I have no proof that it was anything but that. What I do know is this. Sometimes, when the wind hits the window a certain way, I can still see the shape of those eyes. I can still feel the small, stupid fear of thinking someone could be watching me through glass and making a smile that didn't match anything they'd say. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and like. It helps a lot. I promise I won't spam you. Just more nights where sleep feels a little too fragile. The second one happened during a blizzard and involved a cabin that shouldn't have been lit. I was younger then and had been out hunting, which for me meant trying to find silence and forgetting whatever noise I carried in my head. The snow rolled in faster than the forecast predicted. At some point, the woods started to look like an ocean of white. My truck slid off the road into a drift,
and I spent half an hour trying to dig free with numb fingers. The batteries in my phone hit 1% and decided to be dramatic about it. By the time I trudged through knee-deep snow toward the last set of lights I'd seen, I was cold in a way that reached my bones. Then, through the density of falling snow, a little square of yellow glow showed itself between trees. A cabin. Candles in the windows, warm and stubborn against the storm. Part of you expects a person to come barreling to the door, shouting out the mistakes you made out in the elements. Instead, when I knocked, the answer was a silence that made my teeth ache with cold.
A man opened the door, a silhouette against interior light. He stepped back and gestured without speaking, a vague bow into the room. The inside smelled like old wood and tinned citrus. Not unpleasant. There was a single candle on the table, a dripping pillar that painted everything in amber. The man didn't speak. He had a hat, and when he took it off, his hair clung wetly to his skull. I sat by the fire while he simply existed in the doorway, like a watchful statue. He had shape to him, tall, a little too straight, but his face I couldn't see well until the candlelight caught it. When it did, there was something off. Skin too pale under the chin, an immobile mouth. He moved slowly, like someone adjusting to a new body. He didn't ask my name or how I'd gotten there. He fed me stew and told me where I could sleep. Maybe I should have left then. Maybe I was exhausted and relieved and stupidly trusting. Sometime in the night, half asleep, I felt a pressure as if someone had come close enough to breathe onto the back of my neck. The blanket smelled faintly of tobacco and something else, old perfume maybe. I opened my eyes and saw him sitting there at the edge of the bed, the silhouette closer than before. His skin had an almost waxy quality in the candlelight. When he moved, it was as if the muscles didn't quite catch up. I left the room while he watched me stand. My hands were shaking. I told myself I'd be okay if I just walked out to the road and flagged down a car. I pulled the door open, and the storm wrapped me in its noise like a wall. I beat back through the wind until I came across another house, small, with smoke curling from the chimney and bright domestic windows. A couple answered. They were polite and wrapped me in blankets as if I were a stray. Their kitchen had the scent of bread. They offered coffee. I told them where I'd come from and the man at the cabin. The woman looked at me for a long second and then said, "The owner of that place died 2 winters ago. He was found in his sitting room, hands folded, no signs of entry. The sheriff said an accident, but everyone around here doesn't go near it anymore." She must have seen my face change. "You're the second person this month who said they saw a light," she added. "Must be treacherous out there tonight." Did I believe her? I wanted to, because the opposite was that someone had invited me into a house with a dead man nowhere else in sight, or that my mind, clenched in the storm, filled in details. I don't know. All I know is the image of that pale, too still face stayed in the dark corners of my sleep for weeks. Sometimes I think back and wonder whether he knew I was awake when he moved closer, whether he had been waiting for someone to come warm his candle and never leave. The thought is one of those small, cold seeds that grows into something prickly every time I picture the candlelight and the way his shadow didn't quite match his outline.
The third time, I came home drunk and found my house feeling uninvited. I lived alone in a small apartment above my parents' garage for a while. My mom left a key under the mat because she worried I'd lock myself out. She also had a habit of leaving notes in odd places to remind herself of things. She didn't always find them where she expected. That night, I'd been out with friends. We had been louder than we should. I remember the smell of cigarettes on my jacket and the weird dizziness from too much alcohol, and the way my apartment staircase felt narrower than usual. When I fumbled with the key and pushed the door open, the place was dark, but for the glow of the hallway light seeping in. A folded note lay on the coffee table in an old grocery bag my mom liked to reuse. It simply read, in her handwriting, "Back in 5, Mom." My first thought was relief. I called out, "Mom, you back yet?" Footsteps scuffled from upstairs. A shape appeared at the top of the stairs. A head, then a shoulder, then the suggestion of a person. I breathed easier for one awful second, and then a clenched, wrong feeling moved through me, as if someone else were occupying the space my mom usually took. I heard the breath. It wasn't mine. It was close, drawn in a way that sounded like someone watching their feet fall down the stairs one by one, making sure not to make noise. The head tilted at the top of the stairs. There was darkness where the face should have been. I stood frozen for a moment, and then a voice called from the next room. "He's late, I guess. Go make sure your father's locked up." I walked toward the voice and found my mother asleep on the couch in the living room, her TV playing a muted soap. My dad sat in his favorite chair, snoring gently, which is to say they were both exactly where they'd been since dinner. The note? The shoes? The footsteps? I called the police because I was shaking, and I wanted someone to check the place out. They came, respectful and thorough, searching closets, looking through crawl spaces, checking under the beds. They found fingerprints that matched me and the parents. Nothing else. You learn to be paranoid after something like that. I started checking locks twice before I sat down at night. I would catch glimpses of the top of the stairs and feel my chest tighten the way it had when I saw that dark head. Sometimes the lull that comes with a house settling at night would sound like someone pacing in the hall. Maybe it was the kind of thing that happens when you drink too much and misread shadows. Maybe it's a wake-up call about how easily boundaries between my space and the world can get breached. Either way, when I see a folded paper lying on a table, my fingers hover before picking it up. The fourth story is the one that still makes the hair on my forearm stand up just thinking about it. The basement voice. I was studious and prone to burning the midnight oil.
One particular winter evening, I had a term paper due and no will to go to bed. The house was empty. My parents were out doing errands. I was supposed to be alone for the night. I had made tea and put a lamp on the desk. My phone was face down because I wanted quiet. Hours later, as my eyelids dropped and the words on the screen blurred into each other, a soft call came from below, a woman's voice saying my name the way my mom says it when she's calling you from the other room. "Hey, honey, could you come down for a minute?" I paused and answered, "Hold on, I'm on the phone." My hand hovered over the keyboard. Silence. I figured she must be home earlier than expected. I slid off the chair, took the stairs 2 at a time and called, "Coming," as I do when I want to keep the house from echoing. The basement light was off. The crawl space door under the stairs, the little hinged panel that opens to the underfloor, was ajar, and faint cold air puffed out. The floor smelled like damp cardboard, nothing like my mother. I called down again. "Mom, is that you?" No answer. I walked through the kitchen and called my parents' cell phones. Both went straight to voicemail. I left a message and then checked the usual places, the garage, the backyard. No one. Later, when they texted and told me they were at the store and would be home soon, I told them about the voice. We checked the basement together when they came back, light cutting the dark into angles. We looked in every corner, behind boxes. The crawl space was empty. There were no tracks in the dirt, no slips of footprint, nothing. The only thing that caught at me was how much my mother's voice had sounded like her, the exact cadence she uses when she thinks I'm ignoring her to do homework. It wasn't a wrong voice, it was the wrong place. After that night, every creak felt like a call. If my phone vibrated and I thought maybe it was her, my stomach would drop a little. For a long time I asked myself if my brain, hungry for company and jangled from exhaustion, had made something it wanted out of the silence. My dad, practical as ever, suggested stress and a bad case of auditory misinterpretation. He may be right, but when I lie awake and I swear I hear a muffled "hey" from below, I can't help but imagine something small and patient, hidden where no one goes, stretching its voice into familiar words, so that a person wandering the house will answer and come down without the thought to call out its name. The last story is tied up with sleep paralysis and a small, uncanny sound I first heard that night someone hid in the bushes. We had been drinking that night, the kind where your memory is a jigsaw you can fit pieces into only in the light and with effort. My friends and I were stumbling down a street lined with hedges and dark porches. Someone decided a joke would be to hide behind a bush and leap out at whoever passed. It was stupid and childish. We were laughing and taking turns jumping out at one another until I passed a rustle, and something made a noise. It wasn't a laugh. It was a low, wet clicking, like a tongue in a throat working around something that wasn't entirely human. We froze. The group who'd been joking 30 seconds before went silent. Someone's flashlight drifted toward the bush. The silhouette in the leaves moved oddly, like grass pushed down by wind. We laughed it off. 2 of my friends dared the figure to come out. A person stepped free and took a breath, a visible shudder of relief, and we all laughed. But the noise had left its small tattoo on my ear. I could not forget it. It sounded like air being pulled across a missing tooth. Weeks later, I woke in the middle of the night and tried to move. I couldn't. It was one of those sleep paralysis episodes. Your body refuses to obey the mind for a terrible, obedient, terrifying moment. You can see, you can hear, but your limbs are heavy, like they're underwater. That night there was a pressure in my room, an awareness like a heat souring into cold. And then the sound came back, that same low, wet click. I could see something at the foot of my bed, not quite a thing and not quite shadow. It bobbed as if in water. A head, but wrong. Unmoored eyes orbits? I don't know. I know only that the shape moved closer, and with it the smell,
a metallic tinge, not quite blood, but sharp in the back of the nose. The figure made that noise again, closer this time, and I felt like it was tasting the air that surrounded my face. When it got to within a whisper of my mouth, before anything that could be called teeth or teeth-like, the sound stopped. The pressure lifted. My body snapped to life like it had been released from cords. I screamed like a person who just remembered they were alone. After that, people said it was sleep paralysis, nothing more. Doctors could explain the muscle atonia, the mixture of dream imagery with half-conscious awareness. They were right. They aren't wrong. But the problem is the sound. That low, wet click came from the bush weeks earlier. How does a sleep state import the exact sound of a thing you heard while drunk with your friends? Coincidence? The brain making patterns? Perhaps. But the memory of the bush and the memory of the thing leaning over me at the foot of the bed are the same sound and the same sensation. The overlap sits in my ribs and refuses to let me off the hook. Sometimes I wake expecting to hear it, and when the house is quiet, I can imagine the noise stretching along the baseboards. You can't look away from a thing like that. You just keep waiting.
A pale man by candlelight could be a lonely survivor. A note and a head at the stairs could be a trick of alcohol and shadows. Sleep paralysis has medical explanations. And yet, in every case, there's a small detail that doesn't sit with the reasonable explanation. A smile that lasts too long. A voice where there should be no voice. A noise that echoes across two separate nights. Details are funny that way. They behave like breadcrumbs that lead you into a forest and not back out. I don't want to glorify fear. These are not ghost stories told to feel clever in a funhouse. They're the moments that genuinely made me feel small and watched and not entirely sure what to believe. The police were real, and their lights were real. A couple in a warm house offered me more than kindness. My parents were asleep in the room where I found them. People who tried to make sense of what happened did so without mysticism, and often without satisfying closure. That ambiguity is the part that lingers. So where does that leave me? Cautious, sure, wiser than I used to be about the dark, but also a little superstitious in small ways. I don't knock on glass at night anymore unless I want an answer. I check my tires. I listen to the rhythm of my own breath before I sleep, because it helps enforce that I am still here. I keep a lamp on more often than I used to, and sometimes I'll light a candle on a stormy night, just to see shadows move in a friendly way for once. Which of these would you rather face alone? The patient eyes in the window that won't look away. The pale man in the candlelight of his stillness suggests something broken. The dark head at the top of your stairs, waiting to see if you'll notice. The voice calling from a place that has no person in it. The sound that bites into your ear and shows up later at the foot of your bed. If these stories creeped you out even a little, do me a favor. Subscribe and share this video with someone you think will stay up and talk about it with you. Tell me which one kept you awake and why. I read every comment, and I still get a little jump when someone mentions eyes and windows. Thanks for staying with me through these. Be careful with the quiet places tonight. Goodbye.